Nintendo's greed could change the tech industry. Linus Tech Tips. I've never reacted to Linus Tech Tips. I know who Linus is. That much I know. Yeah, Nintendo's greed has been diabolical. So, recently, Metroid Prime 4 released, right? And their decision was, to put... So, for context, there is a open world desert area, right? Just to show how greedy they are. There's an open world desert area, right? But with no music. So, they said they're putting the music as a reward for 100%ing the game, but also the music into an amiibo. So if you want music in your first playthrough in the desert, you need to have the amiibo. Problem is that most people, and we know this, most people that play through the game will not replay it. Meaning they will never hear this track, making this track, regardless, essentially paywalled. That's how greedy Nintendo right now is. And aside from that, Metroid Prime 4 is it's not absolute garbage, but it's not a good game. Anyways.
I could probably build an entire second career just making videos about Nintendo's bad behavior. But the one we're gonna look at today is one that's gonna hit the wallet of nearly every Switch 2 owner. The completely unnecessary left turn into proprietaryville that they have taken with the Switch 2. While the rest of the game console industry has made serious strides toward universal standards and interoperability, this dock is a classic example of locking down a product, not for a good reason, but just because we can, or to make a buck, or because, I don't know.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? A recent firmware update also made some docks essentially completely useless. So some third-party docks you can't even use.
You. And the bigger problem here is that Nintendo is a market leader, and their actions may very well embolden other tech companies to do the same. Check this out. This dock here works perfectly on the Switch 1, and in fact, every other device on the table. And the Switch 2? No. That's the only device we were able to find that it won't work with. All of these docks and dongles you're looking at now will work with the Switch 1 or with your laptop.
Yep. Spread this video to the Nintendo fanboys. There's another problem, right? Nobody talks about it, right? These game key cards, right? Which are essentially just a glorified download code. Here's an interesting part. You don't own these games. They're not even physical games. They are physical in the sense that you can hold them, you can have them in your hand, but they're essentially just a physical glorified download code, right? They're essentially equivalent of buying a game for the PlayStation 5 that is actually the most of the game you just have to download, right? Now here's the funny part. People are like saying you can resell those. Yes, you can, but only until the Switch 2 servers go offline. The moment the Switch 2 servers go offline is the moment you no longer have these games. They're dead. They're gone. People didn't pay attention to that, which I find very interesting.
But you can't use them on your Switch 2. It would seem then that Nintendo has opted to make their new universal serial bus device a little less universal. The question is how? I mean, it's still got a regular Type-C connector, so what's happening?
To find out, we have the Infineon Protocol Analyzer, a little device that intercepts the communication between two USB-C PD devices and allows us to see exactly what Nintendo has done.
Oh, here we go. Normal. Vendor-defined message. But what the heck is a vendor-defined message? And what is this message from our sponsor? Corsair. Their Xeneon Edge touchscreen display can sit anywhere on your desk, it can mount magnetically to a metal surface, and can even be placed inside your case. Get instant visibility on system metrics.
Are you saying I can just, like, connect a small screen with my Twitch chat? Or YouTube chat? The fuck? Crazy. Nintendo's own words, you're not buying the Switch 2, you're buying the licenses to play Switch 2. Remember, there's a classic important saying. There is a classic important saying, right? If buying isn't owning, pirating isn't stealing.
Let's take a step back and explain the wonders of USB in the modern age, which is going to give us some additional context as to why we should be especially mad at Nintendo. Since its inception in 1996, USB has been a consistent standard that's replaced many connectors with one easy to insert connector. There's been tons of revisions with increases in power and data delivery, as well as more and more functionality with each update, all while maintaining a pretty robust backwards and forwards compatibility. It's honestly a pretty impressive collaboration in an industry of min-maxing profiteers. Arguably, its biggest change came with the introduction of the USB-C standard, which was partially intended to make all USB devices just a little more universal. Although there's definitely been some snags in the decade plus since.
So here's where I believe this is all coming from. Here's what I believe this is all coming from. This is coming from the current president of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa. I'm absolutely convinced that since ever this dude has been taking over Nintendo in December 2025, actually June 2018, right? Ever since Iwata died, this has been the case. Because now, no longer a gamers running this company, in my opinion. Now very clearly a guy who has no idea what Nintendo actually is. It's no longer the same company since 2018, and you can tell it is.
The update. In an effort to reduce the amount of USB-C devices that may fry each other because of voltage incompatibilities, the USB-C PD, or power delivery standard, was released. As many of you will know, that's a protocol for negotiation between
ever since who died? Satoru Iwata, the former president of Nintendo. Actually somebody who is actually also a gamer. And with that, Nintendo died. This is like the usual pipeline for any like either game developer or like a console developer, whatever you want to call them. The moment like the gamers are no longer running the company, in the moment a gaming company is no longer run by gamers, you will see this pipeline where it will become anti-consumer, anti-gamer. That is usually what is happening, right? We've seen with Sony, Xbox, since 2018 with Nintendo. This is the usual pipeline.
Two devices to communicate their power and data.
You can also see it with game companies, right? Like Ubisoft is one of those. Halo Studios. You see like the pipeline.
Data capabilities. Lucas from the labs just wrote a really fantastic article about this handshake. And if you want a little more detail, you should definitely give that a read. For now, let's test what's actually happening with the Switch 2. To understand what we're working with, let's test out the Switch 2 and the Switch 2 dock first. And we have image. Wow, these two devices meant to work together. Fantastic. Let's take a look at what all these messages mean. This interface can be a little bit overwhelming if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. The main thing to know is the message column is the messages that are being sent in between the two docks. In the power role, we have SNK, which is our sync device, and SRC, which is our source device. In this case, our source is our dock, and our sync is the switch. So the first thing we're seeing is the source offering up its capabilities. So when you look in this pane over here, you can see that it's offering 5, 9, and 15 volt power. Good CRC, which you'll see all the way down, just means Roger. Then our switch is talking, SNK, and it's looking for object position 3, which is the 15 volts of power. We get a Roger, we get an accept from our dock.
Okay, so basically the dock works, but as far as I'm aware, so this is 3 months back, right? They made this 3 months back. But since a more recent firm, they technically could make an updated video on this technically, right? Since a more current firmware version on the Switch 2, certain docks do no longer work that worked before. Certain third-party docks. But remember Silksong 20 used D for it, and companies were mad at Silksong devs for keeping the price so low. Remember Expedition 33 by random French devs? Absolutely diabolically great game. Absolutely mogging AAA gaming. Yep. Yes. Absolutely. That is happening. Like, imagine, right? Square Enix, right? The guys who do Final Fantasy, right? They pump $200 million into a game and have like, imagine pumping $200 into a game, the game not doing well enough, and you have to have layoffs. Imagine if you have a name such as reputable as Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII, and you still have layoffs. Crazy work.
We get another Roger. Next we have power supply ready, meaning it's get ready to deliver its power. We got our Roger. And then we have a data role swap. So now the Switch is switching roles, and it's kind of taking control of the interaction. Then we get our vcon swap, and to oversimplify, it's just another part of kind of the data role swap. We got good, power supply ready. And then we have a little soft reset where you can see this SOP prime. That's actually when the USB devices are talking to the intermediary devices. So it might be talking to a cable that's in between if it's an active cable, or part of the dock or something. So right now it's doing a little soft reset for those. Then we have our vendor-defined messages, and you can see in this pane, it's asking for discover identity. And this is the first time that our dock and our Switch are gonna communicate, hey, you Nintendo? Are you a Nintendo device? Vendor-defined doesn't mean that it's like an exclusive lockdown thing necessarily, but it can. And then in quick, basically we have these vendor-defined messages where the dock and the Switch are gonna try and negotiate their DisplayPort mode. It takes clearly a lot of vendor-defined messages, and this is sort of where the things become a little unusual. In this case, it's gonna work, and we get a display on our screen after they've negotiated their modes. But let's take a look at what happens when we connect the Switch 2 to a dock that won't work. Now we're gonna test out this pretty generic Nucleum USB Type-C dongle. You can immediately see things are a little bit different. Our dongle gives it source capabilities. The Switch requests based on that. We get our power supply ready, vcon swap, and then the data role swap. And you can see that it's actually in a different order. The vcon and the data role swap are in a different order, which ends up in
rejecting the different dock. Interesting. Nintendo basically put an ID card on each product. Essentially, you could say that, yeah. So you can't use third-party products. I would not be surprised if this eventually ends up with you can't even use third-party controllers, right? Because right now you can still use like turbo controllers, other stuff. I would not be surprised if they would drop a firmware update that blocks third-party controllers like macros, turbo controllers, right? I would not be surprised.
A reject from the Switch. They try this a couple times. Eventually it works. Power supply, we do our little intermediary soft reset, and then we do it all again. And that's a little bit strange. Why are we doing it all again? Okay, yeah. We're getting to our intermediary reset, and then we're into our vendor-defined stuff. We're trying to find who's talking to who in specific. Are these Nintendo products? And then we're discovering the modes. And this is generally the DisplayPort modes. In this, the Switch is asking for a specific mode. We get connected, we get UFD connected, and then it kind of just like fizzles out, and then it sort of stops communicating. And that's gonna be kind of a reoccurring pattern where things
starts noticing that this is not a Nintendo product, so it just like stops checking.
Don't happen in the same order, things get confused, and then the communication kind of just ceases. Let me show you on a monitor. This one's even more clear why things aren't working. They're trying to do the data role swap, and there's a rejection happening from the Switch. These two buddies not working together so good. But we're still seeing our pattern that the Switch has a little bit of a difficulty negotiating when things don't go exactly as it's expecting. That means only hardware with the exact validated negotiation can decode these messages and successfully negotiate a display out from the Switch 2. And this isn't a technical limitation of USB-C itself. Most PD devices can navigate these operations in different orders and make it work. Rather, I think the most likely answer here, and
Nintendo put that in there themselves. They actively tinkered with the Switch 2 and put it in themselves.
The one that avoids making claims we can't absolutely confirm, is that Nintendo made sure that it worked on their own devices and then stopped their efforts there. That means that even if a third-party dock has the correct power delivery and video output capabilities, it just won't fully function with the Switch 2 unless it can successfully communicate using Nintendo's specific undisclosed protocols. This communications lockdown definitely could be malicious, but I wouldn't feel confident taking Nintendo to court about it. But I'm not sure I would chalk it up to pure carelessness either. The most likely scenario, in our opinion, is that this is an example of tactical laziness. What a beautiful term. Because the benefit of this enshittification is so obvious. Money. You need a second dock in your house?
Well, you need to buy official software. It is that easy. You need to buy official software.
Instead of using something you already have, that'll be $120 more directly to Nintendo, thank you very much. You want to go traveling and have something more portable. Time to order another expensive Nintendo-approved accessory. It makes me wonder if we would be better if they just used proprietary port. On the one hand, it would solve the...
That's why they also did not put any connectability onto the Switch. That's probably also why they didn't put any connectability on the Switch Lite, right? The Switch Lite cannot connect to like a laptop, TV, whatever, through like a third-party software because it lacks the capability, even though essentially almost all phones, actually all phones, have the ability to connect through USB-C. Oddly enough, the Switch Lite does not have that capability, even though it is modern enough that it should be able to do that. I'm still salty about that, by the way. So nope, not going legal with Nintendo. You couldn't go legal with Nintendo for many reasons. First of all, they have more money than you. If they can make you bleed it so much that you couldn't afford it.
The seeming underhandedness of the issue and the ensuing consumer confusion. Everyone would have known from the get-go about the incompatibility, and maybe Nintendo could have justified it with a neat, unique feature like a locking port, all while leaving the top USB port as is for charging. But that would mean needing to develop and manufacture a proprietary port, possibly upping the price over a mass-produced generic part, with Nintendo fronting the R&D cost. And proprietary ports means that it's Nintendo's own IP, so they can set the license fee, probably upping the cost on third-party accessories. It would also mean increased e-waste long-term when there's more Switch 2 docks left than Switch 2 players. That's really not ideal. On the other hand, it's exceptionally frustrating to be able to correctly plug...
Not gonna lie, give this some time, and third parties are gonna find a way to work around it. Give it some time.
Plug in your accessories and then not have them work. To be fair, that's not a Nintendo exclusive problem. All Type-C ports and cables have not been created equal. It's an ongoing issue, but in my personal experience, the compatibility issues are generally trending towards becoming solved, not launching themselves towards totally unnecessary compatibility catastrophe, which just makes this so infuriating, especially since the Switch 2 is less capable than most modern regular Type-C devices. The charging caps out at around 15 watts, which may be good for battery health long term, but it certainly would be nice to have the option to fast charge when necessary, and variable refresh rate is currently not possible via the dock. You can only do that in handheld mode, so we're really not asking much of these.
Even Apple manages to be more universal than this crap. Apple was one of the pioneers of the industry move towards mass adoption of USB Type-C and Thunderbolt. I remember they actually took a lot of flack for being the first to ship a laptop, the 2015 MacBook, with only USB Type-C.
Yeah, that was I remember, right? The EU forced iPhone, right, to switch to USB-C soon, so there's that. Apple can't poke at third parties getting hunted down and been sued. Not for the ports. Not for the docks, not for the ports. That doesn't work. There's plenty of third-party docks that I could buy right now for my Switch 1. So not really. They don't do that. Now, for now. However, you never know. So they could technically work around this.
Which is especially funny when you consider how they had to be dragged kicking and screaming on the phone side. But I digress. The point is, in spite of Apple's long proud history of making things proprietary for no obvious user benefit, even they haven't gone as far as creating a proprietary handshake between their cables, their accessories, and their computers. Although, don't imagine for a second they're not capable of it. Oh God, I hope they're not getting any ideas from this. Because once Apple does something, well, the industry follows. Hopefully Nintendo doesn't have quite the same influence.
While we've harped pretty hard on Nintendo so far, we want to give credit where credit is due.
Do we?
They're helping to push the microSD Express standard into the mainstream, instead of making some expensive proprietary format like the Xbox Series or the PlayStation Vita.
Okay, that's fair. But not even everything they've done with their non-proprietary storage is good. The fact that they don't let you just dump save game files off of your system onto it is...
Yeah, but to be fair, yeah. That is normal, though.
quite frankly, offensive to me. Nintendo has angered all of us with their game prices, but here's the thing. The most that can cost me is about $80 US. That's the worst case scenario. But imagine this. I dump 300 hours into a game, and then I don't subscribe to Nintendo Online, so I can't back up my save, and then I happen to lose my Switch, a portable device. I lose 300 hours. I mean, okay. Obviously, I'm not being paid to game, so it's not a straightforward mathematical equation. But if we're talking about what it would cost me in my time and my...
Yep, that is a classic. But then again, I gotta admit, I have to say though, are other companies really doing that? Like, do I keep my save file online when Sony slowly starts shutting down the PS4 servers starting in 2026, where they're slowly removing already like features of the online? Are we gonna argue that? Let's face it. In fact, you could argue that Nintendo waited the longest.
personal energy to go back and get all of that back? Honestly, I'd rather go to work for one day so I can buy a new fucking game versus dump another 300 hours in to get back what I lost.
So what can we do? Well, the best thing to do is not give Nintendo your money. Either wait for the next gen Yuzu or just skip Nintendo games until they fix this. That's probably the best, most impactful move you can make. But when you look at the Switch 1,
Yeah, he's already saying it, right? He's already saying it. The Switch 1 is the console. Is selling itself. It is the fastest selling console in human history. The Switch 2. You are not beating this. We can but well, that pirate them. By the way, it doesn't work. Switch 2 emulation is currently absolute dog shit. For example, you currently can't even emulate Metroid Prime 4. That is not currently possible. So yeah, Switch 2 emulation is not there yet. You are not pirating shit right now.
and 2 sales number, it's pretty easy to feel like your wallet's vote doesn't get you very far anymore. And I don't feel any kind of moral superiority for telling you to stop engaging with Nintendo's games. They are clearly making fantastic experiences that no one else can match. And
that is true, right? The games are phenomenal. Again, see, the crazy part is I can't even put the Metroid Prime situation on Nintendo directly because it was made by the Western studio. However, you can tell that Metroid Prime 4 was supposed to take inspiration from Breath of the Wild, which indefinitely damaged the entire series now. Diabolical.
Lots of you want to play them. You could buy third-party options like the Antank S3 that we're going to have linked down in the video description that somehow has the ability to speak the Switch 2's proverbial language. Who the f knows how Antank figured that out? A friend at Nintendo or on the third shift at one of the factories? Random dumb luck? Regardless, it works for now. Nintendo could technically alter that deal on a whim by changing their protocols in a neat little game of cyber cat and mouse.
Yep, they did. They did. Update 3 months later. They did. They shut down some third-party software with a firmware update. I already said that, but I'm saying it again. They already have done that.
But what we'd all really like is for this video to be out of date as soon as it hits the internet. It seems like Nintendo has it within their power to push a couple of firmware updates to stop this baloney. Baloney? Like this Segway sandwich.
They made it worse.
To our sponsor!
Vessi, summer is the time for
Are you telling me they're having a sponsor for shoes? Diabolical. There's 2 sponsors, by the way. Anyways, that's pretty much the end of the video. Well, what can we say, kiddos? What can we say? Nintendo's greedy. And this has been going on, I'm gonna say this, since 2018, to that degree, the way they're doing it. Ever since that new president popped up. Ever since no longer gamers running this company. That is how I'm seeing it. Anyways. Yeah, the only thing you could do is vote with your wallet, but you'd need to vote in such a mass. They have 3, crazy. You'd need to vote in such a mass that you won't be able to. Nintendo's too big to fail. It's like trying to make Apple fail. Too big. Or trying to make Netflix fail as it is right now. Too big. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe.